Your legs didn't suddenly get weaker. They were slowly being cut off, and you didn't even feel it happening. Right now, blood is struggling to reach your feet the way it used to, and every step you take is working against that silent slowdown. But there's one simple drink that can flip that switch back on, and if you're not using it, you're letting your mobility slip away without a fight. If you're serious about taking better care of your health, make sure you subscribe. I share simple, practical advice designed especially for seniors. And feel free to leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I appreciate every one of you. Let's get back to it. Let me ask you a question most doctors never think to ask. When did your legs stop feeling like yours? Not a dramatic moment, no injury, no single event you can point to, just a gradual shift one morning. You notice the heaviness. Another day, the cold that wouldn't leave your feet no matter how long you'd been indoors. And somewhere along the way, you stopped walking as far as you used to, not because you decided to, but because your legs quietly made that decision for you. Most people over 60 accept this. They call it aging. They adjust. But here's what the research says, and this is the part that changes everything. What you're feeling in your legs is not the inevitable result of growing older. It is the result of a specific, measurable, chemical change happening inside your blood vessels right now. A change that began years before you noticed a single symptom. And a change that, this is the part most people never get told, can be significantly reversed by something as simple as what you drink in the morning. Not a medication, not a procedure, a drink. I'm Dr. James Cross, and I want you to picture something with me. Think about a city's power grid at night. When it's functioning properly, every signal light is active, every district is lit, traffic flows without interruption. Now imagine that grid begins losing power not all at once, but slowly. One signal dims, one district goes dark. Traffic doesn't stop, it just backs up, slows down, gets harder to move through. That is your vascular system after 60. Your blood vessels are not passive tubes. They are living, responsive tissue that relies on chemical signals to stay open, flexible, and efficient. The most critical of those signals is a molecule called nitric oxide. In your younger years, your body produced it constantly, and it kept your vessel walls soft and wide, allowing blood to reach every corner of your lower body with ease. Research published in Circulation, research demonstrated that endothelial function, the ability of blood vessels to regulate themselves, declines measurably with age. Nitric oxide production falls. And when it falls, those signals stop arriving. Vessel walls stiffen, arteries narrow. Blood struggles to reach your lower legs efficiently. That is when you feel it. The heaviness after short walks, the cold feet, the tingling, the slow recovery, the legs that feel like they belong to someone older than you are. And here's the truth that most people spend years never hearing. Your body did not lose the ability to circulate blood properly. It lost access to the raw materials it needs to keep doing it. That is not aging. That is a supply problem. And supply problems have answers. What I'm about to show you is one of the most clinically supported answers in vascular research, and it may be sitting in a grocery store near you right now. So let's talk about what's actually happening inside your legs. Because most people have a vague sense that something is wrong, but they've never had anyone sit down and explain the exact sequence of events playing out inside their own body. And when you understand it clearly, something shifts. You stop feeling like a passive victim of aging. You start seeing the mechanism. And once you see the mechanism, you can work with it. Here is what that mechanism looks like. Every time your heart beats, it sends blood outward through a branching network of vessels, arteries, smaller arteries, and eventually microscopic capillaries that reach the furthest points of your body. Your legs, your feet, your toes. For that blood to travel efficiently, the vessels carrying it need to be relaxed and wide open. And the molecule responsible for keeping them that way is nitric oxide. Think of nitric oxide as the signal your blood vessels wait for before they open. It is produced by a thin layer of cells lining the inside of every blood vessel in your body cells, called the endothelium. When those cells are healthy and well supplied, they release nitric oxide continuously. Vessels relax, blood flows, your legs stay warm, responsive, and strong. But here is what happens after 60. The endothelium becomes less efficient. It produces less nitric oxide, and without that signal arriving consistently, vessels don't stay open the way they should. They begin to stiffen. They narrow at rest, and blood, particularly to your lower extremities, which are already the furthest from your heart, starts arriving in reduced amounts. A study published in the Journal of Applied Physiology found that dietary nitrate intake significantly improved vascular efficiency and blood flow in older adults precisely because it supported the body's ability to produce nitric oxide through an alternative pathway when the endothelium alone could no longer keep up. That detail matters more than most people realize. Because it means the problem is not that your body forgot how to circulate blood. It means your body's primary production system has slowed, and it is waiting for a secondary input to compensate. And when that input is missing, you feel it in burning calves after a flight of stairs. You feel it in the stiffness that greets you every morning before you've had a chance to move. You feel it in the nights when discomfort in your lower legs keeps you from sleeping deeply. You feel it in the slow, quiet way. Your world has gotten a little smaller. Fewer walks, shorter distances, more caution with every step. This is not weakness. This is your body running a complex system on insufficient fuel. And the reason so many people spend years managing symptoms without ever solving the root problem is simple. They've been reaching for the wrong solutions. Because what most people try first, the obvious answers, the common wisdom, doesn't actually address what's happening at the vascular level. And that is exactly where we are going next. So what do most people try first? Water. The moment someone mentions circulation, the first advice that comes back is almost always the same. Drink more water, stay hydrated, flush your system. And yes, hydration matters. Nobody is going to tell you otherwise. Water is essential to blood volume, to kidney function, to nearly every process your body runs. But here is the problem. Water does not contain the compounds your endothelium needs to produce nitric oxide. It supports circulation the way fuel supports an engine, but if the engine itself has a mechanical fault, more fuel does not fix it. It just keeps things moving at the same reduced capacity. Drinking more water when your nitric oxide production has declined is like pouring water into a city that has already lost power. The pipes still work, but the signals are still dark, and traffic is still backed up. So people try the next obvious answer. Fruit juice, orange juice, apple juice. Those brightly colored heart-healthy blends lining the grocery store shelves with reassuring labels and images of active older adults. They feel like the right choice. They feel natural, wholesome, like something a doctor might quietly approve of. But here is what those labels do not tell you. Many commercially available fruit juices, including ones specifically marketed for cardiovascular health, carry a sugar load that directly impairs the very system you are trying to support. Research in cardiovascular medicine has consistently linked high sugar intake to endothelial dysfunction damage to that thin, critical lining of cells responsible for releasing nitric oxide. So while you are drinking something that feels healthy, elevated glucose is quietly inflaming the endothelium, reducing its efficiency, and accelerating the exact problem you were trying to solve. You were not making a bad decision. You were making an uninformed one. And that distinction matters because it means this was never about discipline or effort. It was about having the right information. Now, let's address the third common assumption, the one that sounds the most reasonable of all. Exercise. Movement improves circulation. That is true and well documented. Walking, light resistance training, stretching, all of it supports vascular health over time. If you have been told to stay active, that advice is not wrong. But here is what exercise cannot do on its own after 60. It cannot compensate for a body that is no longer producing adequate nitric oxide at the cellular level. Exercise places demand on your circulatory system, but if the raw materials needed to meet that demand are not present, the system responds with fatigue, cramping, and prolonged recovery rather than improvement. A landmark review published in Nitric Oxide, Biology and Chemistry, confirmed that exercise-induced vasodilation, the widening of blood vessels during physical activity, becomes significantly less efficient as nitric oxide bioavailability declines with age. Meaning, the older you get, the more your circulation depends not just on movement, but on chemical inputs that support the underlying machinery. This is the gap most approaches miss entirely. They treat the symptoms, the heaviness, the cold, the cramping, without addressing the biochemical environment producing those symptoms in the first place. And that is precisely why so many people do everything they are told and still feel like their legs are losing ground. You have not been failing at the solution. You have been applying solutions that were never designed for the actual problem, which means the moment you understand what the actual problem requires, everything changes. And that shift begins with one specific pathway inside your body that almost nobody talks about. That pathway has a name, and once you understand how it works, you will never look at circulation the same way again. It is called the nitrite-nitric oxide pathway, and it is, quite literally, your body's backup system for keeping blood flowing when the primary production line starts to slow down. Here is how it works. When your endothelium was functioning at full capacity in your younger years, Your body produced nitric oxide directly on demand, efficiently, continuously. But after 60, that direct production line weakens. The endothelial cells become less responsive. Output drops. And your blood vessels begin operating without the signals they depend on to stay open and flexible. But your body is not without options. There is a second route, a dietary route, one that bypasses the aging endothelium entirely and delivers the raw material your vessels need through a completely different mechanism. It starts with compounds called dietary nitrates, found naturally in certain vegetables and drinks. When you consume them, something immediate begins to happen. Bacteria living on the surface of your tongue, your own oral microbiome, begin converting those nitrates into nitrites. Those nitrites then enter your bloodstream, travel to your tissues, and are converted into nitric oxide exactly where your body needs it most. Research published in the Journal of Nutrition confirmed that this nitrate-nitrite-nitric oxide conversion pathway remains functional and effective even in older adults, meaning your body's ability to use this route does not decline the way direct endothelial production does. That is the breakthrough hiding in plain sight. Your primary system slowed down, but the secondary system is still open. It just needs the right input to activate it. And here's the detail that makes this even more remarkable. That input does not require a prescription. It does not require a clinic visit. It does not require any protocol more complicated than what you drink in the morning. Now, there is one thing worth knowing that most people overlook entirely: antibacterial mouthwash. If you use it before or immediately after consuming nitrate-rich foods or drinks, you eliminate the oral bacteria responsible for the first step of that conversion. No bacteria, no nitrites. No nitrites, no nitric oxide through this pathway. The entire mechanism gets interrupted at the source. This is not a minor footnote. Studies in the Free Radical Biology and Medicine journal have shown that regular antibacterial mouthwash use measurably reduces nitric oxide availability, with direct consequences for blood pressure and vascular function. Simple awareness of this one detail can determine whether the solution you are about to learn actually works for you or quietly fails without you ever knowing why. Your body has not closed the door on healthy circulation. It has been waiting at a secondary entrance, one that has been there all along for someone to show you where it is. And now that you know the pathway exists, and now that you know how to keep it open, it is time to talk about what actually goes through that door. So what goes through that door? What is the specific input, the one that activates the secondary pathway, bypasses the aging endothelium, and begins restoring nitric oxide to a body that has been running without enough of it? It is not exotic. It is not expensive. It does not come in a capsule with a complicated name on the label. It is beetroot juice. And before you move past that, before your mind files it away as something you have vaguely heard of, I want you to stay with me for just a moment. Because what the clinical research shows about this specific drink goes far beyond what most people realize. And the gap between what people assume about it and what the science actually confirms is significant enough to change how you think about your mornings entirely. Here is what makes beetroot unique. Gram for gram, beetroot is one of the most concentrated natural sources of dietary nitrates available in any whole food or drink. When you consume it, those nitrates move immediately into your saliva, where your oral bacteria begin the conversion process we discussed. Nitrates into nitrites, nitrites into nitric oxide into open, relaxed, responsive blood vessels. But the speed of that response is what makes the research so striking. A landmark clinical study published in Hypertension, one of the most respected cardiovascular journals in the world, found that a single dose of beetroot juice produced measurable improvements in blood vessel dilation and a significant reduction in blood pressure within just 2 to 3 hours of consumption. Not 2 weeks, not after a month of consistency. Within hours of the first glass, participants showed reduced arterial stiffness, improved blood flow to peripheral tissues, which includes your lower legs and feet, and measurable changes in the pressure your heart was working against to push blood through your body. This is not a supplement making a quiet background contribution. This is a direct, fast-acting vascular response documented in controlled clinical conditions, driven by a drink you can purchase at any grocery store. A further study in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition reinforced these findings, showing that regular dietary nitrate intake from beetroot sources improved exercise tolerance and oxygen efficiency in older adults, meaning your legs do not just circulate blood better at rest. They perform better when you ask something of them. And what does that actually feel like? People who begin consistent beetroot juice intake often describe the early changes in sensory terms before they describe them in clinical ones. A gentle warmth returning to feet that had felt cold for years. A loosening of the tightness that used to settle into their calves by mid-afternoon. A quality of movement that feels less effortful, not dramatic, not overnight, but undeniable once it begins. That is not placebo. That is nitric oxide reaching tissue it had been struggling to reach. That is your blood vessels responding to a signal they had been waiting for. Now, beetroot juice is powerful, but like any tool, it works best when used correctly. The timing matters, the quantity matters, what you pair it with matters. And there are specific habits that can either accelerate or quietly undermine everything this drink is capable of doing for your circulation. Because knowing what to drink is only half the answer. Knowing exactly how and when to use it, that is what separates the people who notice a real difference from the people who try it once and wonder why nothing changed. And that is precisely what we are going to break down next. So, let's talk about what actually happens and when. Because one of the most common mistakes people make when they discover something that genuinely works is expecting it to work on their timeline rather than their body's timeline. They try it for 3 days, feel nothing dramatic, and quietly set it aside. And in doing so, they abandon something that was already beginning to work, just not in the way they were watching for. Here is what the timeline actually looks like. In the first 1 to 3 days, the changes are not loud. They are not the kind you announce to anyone. But if you are paying attention, really paying attention, you will begin to notice a subtle shift in temperature. Feet that have been persistently cold, starting to feel less so. A slight reduction in the pressure or tightness that tends to build in your calves by the end of the day. Your body is not transformed, but the chemistry is shifting. Nitric oxide is rising. Vessels are beginning to respond. Research from the British Journal of Nutrition found that even short-term dietary nitrate supplementation, as brief as 3 days, produced measurable improvements in muscle oxygenation and blood flow in older participants. 3 days. That is not a long commitment for a meaningful biological response. By the end of the first week, the changes become harder to ignore. The heaviness that used to follow you through the afternoon begins to lift earlier. Walking feels less like work. Recovery after movement stairs, errands, light activity comes faster than it did before. This is not coincidence. This is your vascular system operating with better supply than it has had in years. By weeks 2 and 3, something more significant begins to emerge. Endurance improves. Not dramatically, not in the way that makes you feel like a different person overnight, but in the quiet, functional way that actually matters. You walk a little further before you feel the need to stop. You stand a little longer without discomfort settling into your lower legs. Your balance feels more reliable. Your confidence in your own movement returns in small but real increments. And at the 1-month mark, if you have been consistent, the difference is not subtle anymore. A clinical review in Nutrients Journal confirmed that 4 weeks of consistent dietary nitrate intake produced sustained improvements in vascular function, arterial flexibility, and peripheral circulation in adults over 60. 1 month of one simple morning habit. But that word, consistent, carries more weight than people give it. Your body does not store nitric oxide the way it stores fat or calcium. It produces it based on what you give it, and it uses what it produces relatively quickly, which means occasional is not enough. Sporadic is not enough. The results belong to the people who show up for this daily, not perfectly, but consistently. And consistency becomes easy when the habit is built correctly. Which is exactly what we are covering next. The precise way to use this so your body extracts every benefit it possibly can. Consistency without strategy is just habit without results. And that distinction matters here, because beetroot juice consumed the wrong way, at the wrong time, alongside the wrong things, can deliver a fraction of what it is actually capable of. The science on this is specific enough that it is worth slowing down and getting right. So here is exactly how to use it. Morning is your window, not mid-afternoon, not with dinner. Morning ideally before your first heavy meal of the day. Here is why that timing matters. When your stomach is relatively empty, absorption is faster and more complete. The nitrates move into your system efficiently, your oral bacteria begin conversion quickly, and nitric oxide begins rising during the hours when your body is transitioning from rest to activity, precisely when your legs need circulatory support most. A study published in the Journal of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics confirmed that nitrate bioavailability is significantly higher when consumed in a fasted or semi-fasted state compared to alongside large mixed meals. That one timing adjustment alone can meaningfully change what you get from the same glass. Now, quantity. You do not need a large amount to produce a vascular response. Research consistently points to approximately 70 to 140 milliliters of concentrated beetroot juice as the effective range, roughly a small glass. More is not necessarily better. Flooding your system with excess nitrates does not proportionally increase nitric oxide production. The conversion pathway has a ceiling. Work within it rather than against it. If the taste is something you are still adjusting to, and many people are dilute it lightly with cold water, or pair it with a small amount of cucumber juice. Cucumber is mild, hydrating, and does not interfere with nitrate absorption. What you want to avoid is pairing beetroot juice with high-sugar mixers that introduce the very endothelial stress you are working to reduce. Now the mouthwash detail again, because it is worth repeating here in a practical context. Do not use antibacterial mouthwash within an hour before or after drinking your beetroot juice. The oral bacteria responsible for converting nitrates into nitrites live on your tongue and in the grooves of your mouth. Antibacterial mouthwash does not distinguish between harmful bacteria and beneficial ones. It eliminates both, and with them, the first and most critical step of your nitric oxide conversion process. This single habit, overlooked by most people, can silently neutralize everything else you are doing correctly. Finally, if you want to extend the benefit through the day, nitrate-rich vegetables like spinach, arugula, and celery consumed at lunch keep the conversion pathway active beyond your morning window. You are not replacing the juice. You are layering support throughout the day. This is not a complicated protocol. One small glass, one specific window, a few simple guardrails. That is all your body needs to begin doing what it was always designed to do. And what happens when it finally gets that support consistently, over time, is something worth understanding before you take that first sip. So what happens when your body finally gets what it needs? Not occasionally, not halfway, but consistently every morning, the right amount, the right way, giving your vascular system the inputs it has been quietly waiting for. Here is what happens. Your legs begin to feel like yours again. Not in a dramatic, overnight transformation. Not in the kind of way that makes you question whether it is real, but in the slow, undeniable way that biology actually works, where one morning you realize you walk to the kitchen and back without thinking about it. Where you climb a flight of stairs and notice, almost with surprise, that your calves did not burn the way they used to. Where your feet are warm before noon without any effort on your part. That is not a small thing. That is your circulation working. And here is the reframe I want to leave you with, because it matters more than any study I could cite. Your body is not your enemy. It never was. Every symptom you have experienced, the heaviness, the cold, the slow recovery, the legs that stopped keeping up, was not your body failing you. It was your body communicating, sending signals with the only language it has, telling you that something specific was missing, that the supply chain had broken down, that it needed inputs it was no longer receiving. For years, the dominant story about aging told you to expect less, move less, demand less of your body, accept the decline as permanent, and manage it as gracefully as you could. But the science tells a different story entirely. Research published in the Journal of Gerontology found that older adults who maintained consistent dietary nitrate intake showed significantly better vascular function, mobility scores, and physical independence compared to peers of the same age who did not because they were younger biologically, but because they were giving their bodies what aging had removed from the equation. The difference between decline and function, in many cases, is not time. It is input. And that distinction, that quiet but radical shift in how you understand what your body is capable of, is the most important thing you can take from everything covered in this video. You are not too far along. You have not missed the window. The secondary pathway is still open. Your body still knows how to convert, produce, and respond. It still knows how to circulate blood to your legs, warm your feet, support your balance, and carry you through your day with steadiness and confidence. It just needs the right material to work with. One small glass. Every morning. 30 days. Pay attention to your legs. Pay attention to your energy. Pay attention to how it feels to move through your day when your circulation is finally getting the support it deserves. Because independence is not lost all at once, and it is not reclaimed all at once either. It comes back the same way it left quietly, gradually, one morning at a time. Thanks for watching all the way through. Staying informed is key to living a healthier, longer life. If you want more simple, practical health advice, make sure you subscribe and tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a comment and rate this from 1 to 10. Your feedback helps me create better guidance for you.